afternoon, we're getting to know Chuck Wilson. He's running for US Congress, District 17, as a Republican candidate. Today, Chuck, we want to talk about several key issues and get to know your position. Today, many people in our district have strong feelings about the issue of immigration and border security. Just this week, we heard tragic news of the murder of one of our own Border Patrol agents. How do you feel about our immigration policy and the lack of security along the border?
We don't have an immigration policy in this country. I think that to understand what we need to do, you have to look at where we are. We let 12 million people walk across the border, and I think some of the reasons we did that were well-intentioned. A lot of the immigrants arrived after 9/11, when our economy was in a little bit of trouble, and we were also beginning to look at some yawning insolvency in the Social Security system. And if you look at some of the effects of 12 million immigrants walking across the border, you have about a 3% increase in the population of the United States. That has an immediate economic boost. You have 3 million new customers, 12 million new customers. And we saw that effect in the housing bubble. We saw people buying homes at the lower end. We saw people shopping, and it was a powerful boost to our economy, indirectly. Most of those illegals who are here are working in companies that have payroll. They pay payroll taxes. They pay Social Security taxes on fraudulent cards, meaning our Social Security system for the last 6 to 8 years has received hundreds of millions, if not more, dollars of revenue from people paying in who will never take out. And I think more than a few of our policymakers understood that. And certainly there are many voters who understand that. And those kind of benefits in our economy are well and good as far as they go. That's not a good government way to fix your economy or fix Social Security. That's kind of a backhanded way of doing it without people realizing what you're doing, because the real solutions are harder. It's harder to talk about the structural problem with Social Security. It's harder to talk about what are we going to do with a need for manual labor, for low-skilled labor in this country that we typically have a hard time filling. And having been a consular officer abroad, having held a consular commission, I've issued visitors visas and immigrant visas before in our embassies abroad. And I can tell you that our policy doesn't exist. You can just look at one thing to see how far off the rails we've gotten from what I would consider, or anyone would consider, a good government solution to the immigration issue. We habitually, when we find too many illegals in the country, we start talking about amnesty, and we try to legalize their status here by giving them a green card. And that certainly would legalize their status, but people don't realize structurally what they're doing. They're putting them on a path to citizenship when they give them a green card. It certainly legalizes them, but most of those 12 million illegals didn't come here to be a citizen. They came here to work. They go home. Most years they'll go home for several weeks and visit their family. Most of the wages that they earn that aren't directly tied to living here will go back home to their families. This is no fault against them, but they didn't come here to be Americans. They came here to work. And why we would try to regularize their presence here or legalize their presence here, putting them on a path to citizenship, which they may not mind having, but they certainly didn't come here for, makes no sense. It would make far better sense to give them a non-immigrant visa that would legalize their status, allow them to stay and work as long as they had a job and stayed out of trouble. And if we approach this from a good government standpoint, the solution is fairly simple. We need to have more consular officers in our Mexican consulates. We need to be thinking about staying open 2 or 3 shifts a day. And we need to talk about having people have background checks to get a visa to come to this country. Make that a fairly easy process. And they can come up here, and as long as they find work, great. They're legal, they pay taxes, they're part of the system. And those visas, non-immigrant visas, would require them to, I think, should require them to go home once a year which they're probably doing anyway, as most people familiar with the legal immigrant problem know. And while they're back visiting their family, they have to get their visa renewed. Yeah, well, of course, part of the visa renewal process is a background check, and if they have unpaid traffic tickets, if they've filed for unemployment, if they've showed up at an emergency room and haven't paid their medical bill, have a medical lien filed against them, those might be reasons to not let them come back. Because one thing that's in the law that's not getting enforced, one of the major hurdles that is required of any immigrant visa applicant to prove before they can be considered for a legal immigrant visa is that they will not become a public charge. Meaning, we require all legal immigrants to prove that they're not going to become a burden on the Social Security system, the Medicare system, the unemployment system, our healthcare system. If we're going to let people immigrate, our law already expects them to come here and be a contributor,
as opposed to recipient of services,
to our economy. And that law is obviously not being enforced. And there's no reason why we shouldn't also enforce it on non-immigrant visa holders. We really have almost enough laws on the books right now to fix the problem. A little bit of reform in the non-immigrant visa category to recognize that there's a flow of people going on and that there's a demand and a supply issue on either side of the border. With a little bit of reform, we can get that supply-demand equation that's ongoing out into the daylight, out in front where we can control it and manage it, and end this issue of people coming across the border at night, having run and gun battles along the river, where you are creating, just like Prohibition created bootlegging, by not having a prudent system in place, we're creating crime by our unwillingness to act. And I think the solution's fairly easy, but at this point, certainly at least one political party in Washington would rather play political football with the issue and try to gain currency in the potential Hispanic community by being seen to be leniency.
Let's reflect a little bit about the jobs that those immigrants may be filling. I think today we heard that 18 cities across the nation are at 15% unemployment. And those immigrants, legal or illegal, are filling low-wage earner positions. How does that come into play with today's 15% unemployment?
The non-immigrant visa mechanism that I talked about would basically put an 11-month cap on that. If we did get into a situation and we did not need that low immigrant rate, all we have to do is just reduce the quota. And of course, we'd be dealing with the issue at the river again. You know, in a free market, you do have some pains. Freedom is not tidy, and we should be patient with it, because most of the good things that has been given to us in this great country have come from freedom, the freedom of choice, and the free market. And with that freedom,